tuning in today from Colombia. I'm Pascal Clarice, originally from Belgium. Now I live in Pereira, Colombia. Everything is in the cloud. I get to live under the sun. And we will do this panel today in English, though, although we are all Spanish speaking because of the wide audience of the internet and because we want to educate them about our beautiful and vibrant Latam esports market. And today to do this, I have wonderful panelists, Nestor, Cesar, and Guillermo, and I will each let you introduce yourself, starting with Nestor, then Cesar and Guillermo, if you don't mind.
All right. Thank you very much, Pascal, for the brief introduction. Well, yes, I'm Nestor Alessandro. I'm from Mexico. I started in the video game industry around 14 years ago as marketing manager for Nintendo Mexico. Actually, not directly for the brand. Well, directly for the brand, but I worked for Latam Inc., which is the main distributor of Nintendo here in Mexico, but working hand in hand with Nintendo. And then I moved on to the esports industry a few years ago, around 5 to 6 years ago, with Mexican Esports League. And I've been within the industry, both in Mexico and worldwide, working for several different companies in Australia, in the US, and in Saudi Arabia, in the UK, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, my turn, I guess. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's really, really important to have this kind of initiatives here in Latin America. We can go deeper later, but this market deserves to have more and more attention. So about me, my name is Cesar Roses. I'm working in esports like 10 years ago already. First, I started in Europe. We created a company called LPP, in Spanish Liga de Videojuegos Profesional. And we started to develop in Europe, and then we made a jump here in Latin America to the main countries. And in the last year, I decided to move on to another different kind of esport. And now I'm in charge of Digitech here in Latin America, which is a company also focused on esports, both educational field and also production, B2B production for publishers and brands. Thank you very much.
Well, hi guys, thanks again for the invitation. I'm Guillermo. I am 37 years old. I have been working in sports marketing for almost 16 years. I have been an athlete for myself, most in action sports like skateboarding, mountain, downhill, etc. But I have been working in Red Bull, Vans, all that brands. And 6 years ago, I made the transition to esports because Riot Games needed a professional that can teach the players how to be professional in terms of what an athlete is expected from. After 4 years in Riot Games, then I worked a year and a half in Garena for Free Fire, being the esports manager for Latin America. And the last year I have been leading the TV Azteca, which is the biggest TV network here in Mexico. They start their esports apartment or whatever. And I actually left TV Azteca a couple of months ago, but actually it was the same, like promoting, and it was more like sports media for esports, but we were broadcasting events, doing shows, etc.
Guillermo, we have Garena Free Fire in common. I just did an event for them in Latin America, in Colombia, most precisely, with James Rodriguez and David Ospina, James Rodriguez for the non-Spanish speaking audience. During the pandemic, because everybody was at home, and we hooked up something with Garena Free Fire, which was pretty cool. And I'm sure we will get back to Garena Free Fire during this conference. All right, so just I think we got a very good idea of how you transitioned into esports professionally. to get to know each other a little bit better. What made you fall in love with esports? What was the moment, the passion, the thing that ignited the passion?
Well, in my case, it was to actually get to know the esports audience and the esports industry as a whole had a very large similarity to every single sport out there, professional sport, amateur sport, or whatever other entertainment and sports audiences you might come up with, right? So it actually made me realize that with this similarity, you can do a lot of different things. And even though there's a lot of similarities amongst it, there's also several different differences amongst the audience. It's a little bit different. The audience that goes and watches football matches rather than goes and watches a tournament of League of Legends or Dota 2 or whatever other esport tournament that there is out there, right? There's these small differences which make you think a little bit outside the box and how to communicate with these guys and how to actually approach them and what is actually going to engage with them. So that's what it actually hooked me up, right? And one of the things is that, for example, here in Mexico, the industry, the esports industry, wasn't as mature as, for example, in Asia or in Europe, or even in North America. The industry here was a little bit on its diaper phase. It's still growing and still constructing its solid basis for esports. There were a lot of amateur organizations and amateur tournament organizers that were trying to do and try to build something, but weren't doing it professionally. So that's what it caught my eye right away, and trying to bring all the talent that at least here in Latin America there is, both for casters, for players, for streamers, etc., etc.
How about you, Cesar?
In my case, I come from a traditional cooperative business world, so it was like a huge jump for me, like joining here. But I mean, since I was a kid, I love video games, and there was a moment, and you all know, like 10 or 20 years ago, there was nothing professional in terms of esports. But I was able to check it out, Korea, in my case, StarCraft leagues in Korea. And it was like, what about being a pioneer in Europe and create something like it and try to fill stadiums? It sounds crazy, but now it's a reality. So that's the reason I decided to make the jump. We create this crazy project in Europe, and here we are.
And you, Guillermo?
Well, for me, it was all about, I have been playing video games all my life with my brothers and my cousins, being competitive about everything, like a bunch of, cavemans. We're like 8 cousins, all guys playing video games, going on weekends to stay in some cousin house and spend 24, 48 hours playing video games. But also from the other side, I grew up doing skateboarding, mountain biking, etc., surfing, and I grew up in the 2000s with all these X Games kind of lifestyle, and by the time around 2010, 2012, action sports started going down, and actually the generation that loved action sports was actually getting older, like me, and the new generation wasn't engaging with action sports as well as we did. So by the time I caught bands, it was around 2014, and by casual, a headhunter looked at me from Riot, and they were actually looking for the specific experience I had for professional athletes. I love to find new talents, discover them, grow them. I actually sign a lot of Latin American champions for Red Bull in wakeboard, freestyle motocross, etc. And actually, as Nestor said, it's the same. For if you took out the sport and you want to be professional, you got to do everything the same. It's contracts, social media, interviews, all that stuff that actually make you a professional athlete. Doesn't matter which sport you are in. So that's actually what became the spark for me. I saw the opportunity to the growing of esports. Actually, when I was in Red Bull, we watched the first esports athlete sign for Red Bull, and for us who came from action sports, it was like like a bad thing. We said like, hey, we have been working years for making these super athletes, like, almost, I don't know, like super guys that do backflips and risk their lives in all kind of sports. And suddenly you say like a guy with a computer is going to be a Red Bull athlete. At that moment, it was like a crush for me. But then I started understanding that the new generation was coming from then. And it was natural. As soon as I started reading and learning about Riot, about League of Legends, about esports, it was a click for me. And since then, it has been 6 years from that, and 7 years almost. And everything has been cool.
A lot of what you guys saying is resonating with me. With Cesar, I was stationed in Hong Kong between 2002 and 2006, working at Lixang. And so I saw that StarCraft movement happen in Korea, but I didn't like StarCraft. And so at the beginning, I was resistant. I was a little bit like Guillermo, like, what? What is that? People watching other people playing games, and there's a huge audience, and it's a sport. But then somebody showed me a match in Street Fighter of the two best players in the world. And I liked Street Fighter, so I could understand what they were doing. And after I saw that, I was like, oh, okay. It's like watching Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi play. And I'm just a guy at the park. And just because I play at the park doesn't mean it's not beautiful to watch the best of the best do it just so much better than I would. And then it all clicked like that. But Red Bull, I gotta say, fast forwards to where we are today. Red Bull now, the synergy that they have between their medical staff and their trainers, between the F1 team and the sports teams and the esports team, and how it's starting suddenly to come together to open doors. This gives them an advantage, because one thing we haven't talked about yet, but we are talking about more and more in the industry, is mental wellness. And it's okay to play a lot of video games because that's your training, but I don't know any soccer player or basketball player who practices 16 to 20 hours a day, doesn't sleep, doesn't eat well. So there is that balance that now we are talking more and more about. And that's where you see it's really a sport, because the discipline that it takes, the resilience, and the ambition and the hard work is comparable to sports outdoors. And after all, chess is a sport as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Pascal, but yes,
Go ahead.
I completely agree with you on those, and that is part of what I was saying. Those similarities between not only the audiences but also the players as well, and how the whole industry has commonalities, right? Like, hey, if you go to a stadium to watch 22 guys kick a ball up and down a football field, now you can go ahead and watch 10 players go ahead against each other on a Call of Duty match or a FIFA match, even that one, right? And as you said, there's also this training process for them, that they're training okay, yeah, hooked up on their consoles or on their PCs, but they also have to be mentally healthy, and they have to eat well, and they have to exercise as well to keep their to keep their energy,
The performance.
the performance, exactly, right? And as every other pro player, we see a decline as time goes by on pro players. They start losing, they start getting slower on their reactions, et cetera, as a traditional sport player or athlete, right? So it's the same thing. I think it's only a matter of how, for example, brands engage with that. And as Guillermo was saying, yeah, it was kind of difficult for brands to actually watch and evolve and take a bet within esports, and we can see that still here in Mexico. I know that there's always going to be the endemic brands that are naturally going to go and support esports, but the non-endemic brands are having a hard time to actually engage with these sports. They still don't see the benefits out of it, right? And well, I imagine that you have a lot of experience over there in TV Azteca with showing different brands what to sponsor their esports engagements, right?
That's a good segue into, I think, the next question, to go back from esports in general to Latin America, which is, we've talked a lot, you guys have talked a lot, but I could have talked a lot about it as well. The difficulty is of Latin American esports. It was very amateurish, lagging behind, very few sponsors, very little money coming in.
Yeah, and very unsupportive parents.
Yeah,
very unsupportive parents.
At the beginning, as many things in gaming in Latin America as well. This being said, wouldn't you say the last couple of years, Latin American esport, on the back of Garena Free Fire and League of Legends, FIFA as well, is really getting somewhere, and that we've had some catalyst moments? Maybe we can go into the positive shifts that you've seen the last couple of years, and why you think Latin America now is growing, if you agree.
Well, if you let me start, I think one of the milestones that have been evolving for the last year is actually how the teams take serious everything. You know, in 2015, when I started working for Riot, everybody was like a friends team. You know, they live in a shitty apartment, 5 guys. You know, they only want to play. And through the years, we start putting them like, yeah, but now you gotta have a coach. And then we put the analyst position, and then they start growing, and they say like, okay, we need psychologist, we need nutrition guy, we need a physical trainer, we need a lawyer. So the teams themselves start like getting more professional every year, and they start becoming from the kids team or a friends team to actually companies. You know, they start getting investments. The investments start asking them for numbers, for reports, for 3-month or 6-month reports, etc. So I think that's one of the milestones that made esports explode in Latin America from the last 2 years. The teams themselves start becoming professional. So the sponsors and the brands and the non-endemic brands start looking at them, because they now are professional and serious, not just kids in their apartment, you know?
I think you also wanted to say something about parents not being supportive when I cut you.
Yeah, it's the same. It's like, if you're a parent, you have a 16, 17 years old kid and tells you like, hey, dad, I'm going to go live to Mexico City and I'm going to be paid for playing video games. Dude, at the beginning, that was like mind blowing. Actually, the first, Cesar can remember that the first Free Fire World Championship that we had, we took 2 teams to Thailand. And one of the winner teams was from Colombia. and the parents were super worried about them being mules for the narc, you know, like, you're bringing my kid to Thailand, dude, how many kilos of coca you want to put on them, you know? And I had to talk to them and explain them and like, guys, this is real. This is serious. This is a company. We exist. Here's all the links. Here's my address. Here's my ID. Here's my phone. 24 hours. Call me if you need something. You know. But from that to the point that we are now, it's really a long way.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. The Colombian angle is funny, but I think it has happened in every country in its own way. What, you're going to pay him how much to go where to play video games? Already when you go to a parent and tell him or her that their kid could be a professional soccer player at 13 or 14, it's like, oh, I'd rather he studies, because who knows, you know, there are many people who dream of it, but how many people can make it? But in video games 5 years ago in Latin America, oh yeah.
No, it changed. You know what other changed a lot? This kid from Argentina that took that second place or the third place in the Fortnite World Championship. So he earned like $1 million. And it was news all over Latin. Like, oh, this kid earned $1 million playing video games. And after that, I feel a lot of parents like changing their mind, like say like, huh, this can be a career. This can be a business. Actually, this kid can pay for all of the family.
Somebody from my village can do it. Somebody from my village, from my microcosm can do it. You're absolutely right. I started playing soccer when I was in 86, because my country, little Belgium, went to the semifinals. And there was also Diego Maradona, which showed me how to play the beautiful game. But then I started playing basketball when I saw Michael Jordan in the 92 Olympics. So there is this emulation of seeing the greatest and then seeing somebody from your own town, and you start thinking, hey, if this sucker I went to school with can do it, I can do too. And that's been the case of so many things in video games lately. Anybody wants to add to some of these catalyst moments in Latin America?
Yeah, I would love to. But first of all, I'm not agree, and I'll explain why. Because I always hear people, as you know, I'm not from Latin America. I live here a lot of years already, but I'm from Europe. And I always hear like, oh, we're small market, we're still amateur, we're miles away from the rest of them. And that's not true. And that also happens in Europe. That also happens in Spain. And when you belong to a country, you always feel like you're so away from the rest of the country, but this is not true. Actually, Latin America is super huge market, only below North America and Southeast Asia, and that's it. It's a really huge market, and we really need to be proud of it. Absolutely.
And I think Garena Free Fire is proving that to the world, because the millions of dollars they are making on the continent shows the others, hey, it's doable, you're just doing it wrong. Go ahead, Nestor.
That's it.
Yeah, I wanted to, I'm sorry, I wanted to agree with you, Cesar, saying that we are actually a huge market. Whole Latin America is very big. We have a very good position within pro players, and as well as leagues and casters, et cetera, et cetera. The thing is that, this tendency, if we're talking about, for example, 8 to 10 years ago, the whole esports ecosystem, we were lagging a lot of things going on here in Latin America. But nowadays,
I would even say 4 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago.
Yeah.
The change was 2017, 2018. There were big shifts, big shifts. And apparently we're discovering today that we owe a lot of it to Guillermo and his pioneering teams.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think and by having, for example, this experience by working with companies not only here in Mexico or in Latin America, but also in Europe and in the MENA region, etc., is that well, there is a lag now. Nowadays, as you mentioned, Pascal, 3 years ago, there has been a great change on what is going on here in the whole region now, and you can see it, for example, with the integration of TV Azteca, gambling, going from traditional media and gambling to go through esports and watching the benefits that it has to go into esports. You can notice that we are in a position right now. I think that we're still on a growing phase. We haven't still reached that maturity level just yet, but we're getting there. And yeah, absolutely, I completely agree with you, Cesar, that the whole Latin American market is a huge market, and it's a market that brands should actually take a look upon, and not just disregard, like, hey, this is Latin America, we're not going to be working with them. They have to look at us, and that is one of the shifts that still hasn't happened. It has happened on the esports industry, but I think that the sponsorship levels are still not there. Specifically the non-endemic brands, they're still very conservative on what they're sponsoring, like traditional sports, et cetera, et cetera. So, well, that's my point of view.
Absolutely.
I think we all agree that Latin America is a big market now. Now, when it became that big market a couple of years, 3 years ago, we could argue for a long time. I completely agree with Nestor as well that TV Azteca, not only did we see them gambling, but winning that gamble. And that story, by the way, we see it in many other emerging markets. India has been going through the same big shift over the last 2 or 3 years, with also sports media, adding esports, and maybe it's a segue now. It's accelerating with COVID, because there was no sports on TV, on radio, on online media. So if you don't add an esports component to your sports media brand, what's the content? People talking about possible transfers where we come back playing. That was the case from February to here in Colombia, because you got to realize, guys, Mexico is a little bit ahead of the curve. But in Argentina as well. Colombia here, traditional media made the shift from thinking about doing things to doing things in February, March, because suddenly there was time, there was budget, there was an audience waiting for content, and there was nothing to propose. Did you see a bit of that in more countries? I'm talking out of Colombia here, but I'm sure that digital transformation with COVID was accelerated elsewhere, right?
It was crazy in TV Azteca, because I was there in January. I was the video game guy, you know, and then in April, the soccer association in Mexico quit all games, and they start playing FIFA with the pro teams. So the professional soccer players were playing FIFA live for all the audience who wanted to watch sports. So it was crazy. It's just switched from nothing to being the only sport that we were actually able to broadcast, you know? So yeah, it was, but in the other side, I feel it from the inside that it was a little bit temporarily. Like it was because of the pandemic, yes, but as soon as the government let the players go and play the games, that like the esports fever starts to get down, you know. It's there, it's a statement, but I don't think it was just like, oh, because we start here, we're never gonna let it down. Nah, they as soon as they could start playing and people can watch usual sports, like the pike for that got to the same level as it was in January.
Anybody wants to add to that? To the digital transformation?
I think that's a normal situation for a crashing reality. I mean, going back to the catalyst of this transformation, there are two more important things, and for me, the most important one are the brands. So the first time I came here in Latin America, like 5 years ago, what I found is was most of the brands who were investing here were endemic brands with really low budgets. That was the reality. I came from Europe, and we were a bit used to bigger budgets. But the truth today is the non-endemic brands are investing much more than Europe. And I had the chance to see both worlds. For example, when I opened LBP here in Latin America, for example, we sold naming sponsor for the League of Legends and Free Fire professional leagues to brands like Telcel here in Mexico, and Entel in Chile, and Claro in Colombia, and Flow of Ibertel in Argentina. And I can assure you those budgets were so contextual to the kind of sponsorship they were about. Now in Digitech, only for the student leagues, the college leagues, and the institute leagues, we have Banorte, which is one of the biggest banks here in Mexico. We have Telcel as well. And so this is, for me, the first reason of this change. The brands, due to the crossing reality, they are aware that the target audience from 16 to 30 or 35, they're not in the traditional media, they're not in press, they're not in radio, they're not in TV. They're in digital channels, they're in Netflix, they're in YouTube, they're in Twitch. So due to this, to this crushing reality, we have the power to close these kind of deals because we got the audience and we speak their language. Those are our both biggest strengths. And another thing regarding to the parents, and this is important, I think this is a problem actually, but it's going, it's solving quite faster, especially because of the press. You know, we were forced only to appear in the endemic and tech press years ago, but now this is also an important thing for the general press. Because, you know, a player that earns a lot of money for a tournament, a player who has a scholarship, we're giving a scholarship, for example, only for playing video games. Now we develop in Digitech educational content like learn physics through Overwatch, learn biology through Minecraft. So this kind of content and of course the help of the main press help us to stop these stigmas, you know. And playing video games is good. It improves a lot your decision making, improves your reflex, and with moderation, but it's a really good thing.
You're right, and actually this is the last change and shift that we have to see, but it's starting here in Colombia. The Paralympic Committee, not the Olympic Committee, but the Paralympic Committee recognized esports as a sport, and they are using it to train their Paralympic athletes, so not gamers, actual competitors at the Paralympics, to train their reflexes since the beginning of the pandemic. Because they were forced to stay at home, they couldn't train, and so they were adapting the training. It's adapt or die, right? In the same way that the brands have to adapt to the opportunity, well, the Paralympic committees are also adapting, and you're right, we need more of these positive narratives around gaming, that it's not just an addiction. It can be an addiction, but it can also be such a great thing. Like playing soccer with your friends, you get a lot from it, whether you go professional or not. It's part of your growth. The next question I wanted to ask about the Latin American market, which strikes me because I also come from Europe, Cesar. And so there is something that strikes me in the Western market. I wouldn't say the same in Asia, but in the Western markets, it's very hard to make a push for mobile esports, which is seen as a little brother that, you know, is not worth paying attention. Over here, and we go back to Garena Free Fire, mobile esports is a thing. How and why do you explain that? Do you see it? Do you agree with it? And do you think it's just due to Garena Free Fire, or there are other reasons to it?
Well, I think I have the first.
Yeah, no, you're perfect for this question.
You know, there's two reasons. The first one is that Latin America is one of the markets with most smartphones in the world. That's a fact. But the second one is that we don't have top of the shelf smartphones. We have like below average smartphones. Most of them are heritage from your parents because they want to know where you are and they give you their old cell phone. And because of that, Garena Free Fire is perfect because Free Fire doesn't need like a top of the shelf smartphone. You can play it with actually almost every cell phone in the market right now. So that opens the door for a lot of, there's actually kids between 12 and 15 years old that they are actually not able to buy a cell phone by themselves. That's just like a parent cell phone. And it's the only big esport or big game that they can play together. And even if you have a better cell phone and all your friends are playing in Free Fire, and you can play Fortnite or you can play COD Mobile, but all your friends are playing Free Fire, you're gonna play Free Fire. So it's having like average cell phones, but also it's the social place that all the kids are playing. It's I don't know if you guys understand or can come with the concept. We have this thing called tazos, which are this place that it's like a disc that it came on the Frito-Lays, let's say, and you play for them, and it was like a collection that you actually have from different, I don't know, cartoons or whatever. But when this wave of tazos start, everybody on the school was playing them. So if you were not playing tazos, you were not on fashion, you know, we're not like cool kid as everybody was. So I think it's the same effect with Garena Free Fire. It's like the tazos for the next generation or the new generation.
I have a comment here, and there was a story that a guy from Garena told me. It's a funny one. And I mean, here there are both things. The first one is why the Latin America market is so huge in terms of mobile gaming, and it's so simple. It's a region with a lot of difference in terms of budget or how people live, and a cell phone is much cheaper than a good computer or a console, especially if you're not having the last one. That's the first to the first answer. And regarding Free Fire, a guy who's probably here told me one day, the reason for the developers of Free Fire of focusing this market was the game is really optimized for any kind of device. So if you remember, like a few years ago, I don't know if that happens, if that still happens, if you find for an application in Google Play or App Store, if your device does not support it, it will the App Store will show you the most similar one, okay, that your device supports. So every time another, I won't say names, but you know, the other battle royale mobile games made a marketing campaign here in Latin America, people from Garena really celebrated, you know, because it was free promotion. It's a funny story. I really like it, and it's explained very well how this market works in terms of mobile gaming. But I love this story.
Yeah, I just want to add another thing onto that. Now, one of the things that I believe that actually exponentially boosted Free Fire over here in the region is that the amount of people playing on mobile is huge. It's not only that you're able to play with any device that you may have, that it's a lot cheaper to have a device, but also that there's a lot more people playing games on their cell phones during their travels to work or to school or during their free time, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of, it's like, hey, you have these a lot of people playing Candy Crush, for example, right? Even though the audience is not the same, but we can compare with that. The more the people are playing games on their mobiles, it's easier for mobile games to actually succeed. So I just wanted to add that to both Guillermo and Cesar's comments.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of it. And the thing about it starts with low-end devices, but if it's low-end devices, then it's all devices. So the more inclusive you are, you have that community effect that Guillermo mentioned, that you want to play with your friends. But I like the piece from Cesar because it's the missing link I didn't have in the whole Free Fire story. I knew they had optimized for low-end devices for Southeast Asia, so Vietnam, Thailand, all these markets, because that's where Garena was strong. And then it kind of took them by accident what happened in India, Russia, and Latin America. But now I get the explanation from you, Cesar. It was thanks to that cross-promotion thing from the Google Play. This wasn't an accident. This was a systemic thing, a lucky blessing, and then they ride with it, and they really did a great show out of it. But you're right, when it's exclusive, it's universal. Are there other idiosyncrasies from the Latin American market that might surprise somebody who hasn't lived here and might look at esports from a European or Asian or Western perspective? What is different, weird, funny, or, well, just different over here?
Well, there's something that definitely affects the whole esports ecosystem and the whole video game industry as a whole. And this is a cultural thing, at least here in Mexico, and I believe so. It's true as well for the rest of Latin America. You can see this tendency where even though the social economical level of the people, it's not that high, they tend to buy high-end things. They tend to buy the huge TV, the huge stereo system, to have the latest console and video game console and the latest PC, and even though they might not be able to afford, for example, a car, but they will buy these entertaining things on that side. I think that at least here in Latin America, we can leverage that in our favor within the esports ecosystem and within the video game industry as well. But I think that's one of the parts that actually helps the market expand and the market grow here in Latin America. I don't know if I'm not really sure if it's a cultural thing also in whole Latin America or not, but in Mexico there's a clear tendency that happens. Lower level income people tend to buy like higher quality things for their house. In the case of entertainment, televisions, stereo system, consoles, etc.
I certainly like your hypothesis, because during the subprime crisis, video game sales went up while the rest of entertainment went down. And somebody made that argument that if you are compressed for your income, then an investment in video games gives you more hours of entertainment for the same amount of dollars. Because to the cinema, you only get the 2 hours. If you go for a drink, tomorrow you have hangover and it's done. And you know, with video games, you have the replay value. You can play 60 hours, 120 hours out of the video game. So and ultimately, it's cheaper to entertain yourself and your kids this way. So you're onto something, my man. Anybody else wants to add something to this or different?
I think there's other thing. Latin Americans, we are super passionate about our teams in sports in general, from your city, because your parents all your life have been fans from one team. And I don't know if it's kind of what was first, the egg of the chicken here, but now there's a lot of professional football teams getting into esports. Of course, it was first esports, and they saw the opportunity here and then got into it. But that like completes the cycle and brings a lot of new fans into esports, because Chivas is in, Boca Juniors is in, which is the other Argentinian?
River Plate.
River Plate is in. So I think that it's like a big shift in things, because also your parents, which is a fan for Chivas from all their lives, they start seeing Chivas in esports, and it's like, okay, I can enjoy quality time with my son watching esports, but at the same time, I can cheer for my all-time team, you know? So I think that's the other idiosyncrasy, is that it's super hard to explain. And for example, Southeast Asia doesn't have those passions for their local teams or their soccer teams or their sportive teams. And I don't think any place in the world except from Latin America had that passion, like Brazil.
Italy.
Well, yeah, Italy can be. Yeah, it's true. But Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, and Mexico, we're crazy about our teams. It's a religion.
It's a religion,
exactly.
You're right. You pick it up from your parents when you're a kid.
And it's generational, yeah.
And
your grandparents, your parents. Exactly.
Yeah. The UK is a little bit like that too, which is why the small teams have full stadiums, because you support the team that your dad was supporting, the end, whether they win, lose, or, but this goes back to the beginning of our talk, what you said, Guillermo, that parents were not very supportive. This is going to help a lot, because first of all, now they can watch with the kids as a family. Like during the World Cup, my wife doesn't understand the offside rule or why you get a yellow card, but every 4 years she watches Colombia play at the World Cup. So that's now becomes a family event, and it's good that esports has those family events, not just the kid watching in his room, but watching together, because it's Chivas, because it's River Plate. And also, it's taken seriously. If you can play for Boca Juniors or River Plate, Daddy is going to understand that, and he's going to explain that to mommy. No problem. That's not going to Thailand for an event that he never heard of. You know what I mean, Guillermo? That's for real. All right. So I think I had another question lined up here. Hold on a second. I don't have it in memory. This one. Oh yeah. Well. This is maybe the perfect segue to what we were just saying. The Latin American culture right now, and already before that, Latin American culture has actually inspired the world in music, in fashion, in cinema, and look at the size of J Balvin and Nicky Jam nowadays. They are the biggest music stars globally. Do you think Latin American gaming and esports is about to get that moment under the sun, where it's not just growing and catching up, but going to come up, maybe Garena Free Fire is that thing that we know more about mobile esports over here than the rest of the world. That story of democratization, I don't know. How do you see that? That shining moment in the spotlight for Latin American gaming?
Well, I think that there might come the time where Latin America will surpass North America, Europe. Not really sure if Asia, but will surpass on that capacity. And I think that there's one specific thing that will help Latin America to achieve that, and it's the language, that we all share one language, and we all it's not, we're not talking about right now, we're talking about countries, like individual countries. We're talking about Colombia, what's happening in Colombia, what's happening in Argentina, what's happening in Chile, what's happening in Mexico. But through the time, we will become one huge market. It's a whole Latin American market. Obviously, we'll leaving aside Brazil because of the language difference, but even with that difference, we have a lot of similarities as well with Brazil, right? So that is one thing that's going to help the whole market bring together and come together as one and surpass all other markets. Not very sure when would this happen. If it's going to happen in a couple of years, if it's going to happen in 10 years from now, but eventually I think it will.
Guillermo, I see you're unmuted. You want to add to this?
Well, I just unmuted because I think it's easier to keep talking. But yeah, we are now living another milestone. For the first time ever, we have 2 Latin American players in the North America League of Legends League in LCS, Jose de Odo and Nuri. Those 2 guys are the first ones to actually go to a first top team and play in the top league from a top region. So that can start like a fashion to start bringing other players. It's Maradona thing when he went and played to Europe, or for us was Hugo Sanchez. It's that when the other markets start looking at us as a region and said like, oh, they produce good players. They can actually afford to bring something new to the esports ecosystem, as you said, how we can influence other parts of the world, maybe with our play style, with the way we play and we do esports. And I think today we're living another milestone that is gonna shift these things.
Okay, Dio, a couple of years ago.
Running out of time, so we have to come to the end. Sorry.
Cesar, 10 seconds before we say goodbye. You wanted to add something?
Thank you very much for inviting me. Just as a recap, we need to love ourselves. We need to love our market. We need to love Latin America. It's a huge one, so let's keep pushing for it. Thank you very much.
Be orgullosos. Thank you, everyone, for your time.